When Julian awoke, the silver-haired young man before him was pressing the tip of a blade to his throat. The man was ethereal and severe, while Julian's own tunic was in disarray. His eyes clouded with a feigned, misty confusion. Phelan's voice was frigid, laced with disgust, as he demanded to know what Julian was plotting this time. A disembodied thought echoed in Julian's mind, explaining that this was a dark fantasy epic. His role was that of the protagonist's beautiful, spiteful younger brother, coddled and cruel. In the original narrative, this character relentlessly tormented the protagonist, Phelan, only to be utterly abandoned when he was later imprisoned, his body destined to be used as a living conduit for dark magic. The mission was simple: get close to Phelan and rewrite that ending. Julian pointed a trembling finger to a nearly invisible scratch on his shoulder. He said, his voice catching, that he had been hurt. He had heard that Phelan was skilled with healing arts and had only wanted him to take a look, nothing more. He had been thrust into this world moments before, and a cold voice in his head had warned that if he didn't wake up, the hero of the story was about to run him through. Phelan's voice was as sharp as a frosted blade when he accused him of faking, telling him to stop trembling and confess his true intentions. The cold, sharp pressure against his neck was a stark reminder of his mortality, and Julian jolted as if waking for the first time. Several feet away, Phelan stood with his sword, his posture regal, his features chiseled and striking. If not for the weapon held so mercilessly against his skin and the contempt in Phelan's eyes, Julian might have admired the man's austere beauty. He tried to explain himself, but the aura from the blade was suffocating. He attempted to inch away, but a sharp sting at his neck silenced him, the faint metallic scent of blood filling the air. He froze. Phelan's dark eyes swirled with fury as he commanded Julian to stay away from him. Julian felt a surge of anger at the protagonist's volatile temper, but kept his expression as meek as a cornered animal. The voice in his mind explained the context. The character he now inhabited had spent months tormenting his senior, stealing elixirs, sabotaging his training, and spreading malicious rumors. Phelan's current hostility was, therefore, entirely justified. The voice warned that his other Academy brothers would arrive soon, and he needed to salvage the situation quickly. He hurried to repeat his excuse to Phelan. He claimed he'd been practicing his swordsmanship and had accidentally injured himself, and hearing of Phelan's expertise in medicine, he had sought his help. Phelan's brow furrowed, questioning why he would be half-dressed in broad daylight just to have a wound examined. A cold dread washed over Julian. The voice in his head offered a visual aid, and a horrifyingly clear picture flooded his mind. Himself, kneeling on the cold stone floor, his tunic pulled down to expose a pale shoulder and delicate collarbone, dark hair spilling around him, his eyes red-rimmed and pleading. It was a blatant attempt at seduction. He scrambled to pull his tunic closed, horrified. The original plan had been to lure Phelan in and then falsely accuse him of assault. He had to salvage this disastrous opening. He meekly pointed to the faint red mark on his shoulder, asking if Phelan didn't believe him. Phelan was skeptical, stating that Julian was the laziest apprentice in the entire Ethelgard Academy. He was always found sleeping in the library or teasing the sprites in the Southern Grove, never practicing with a blade. Julian fell silent for a moment before claiming, with false bravado, that he practiced in secret. He explained that he felt his skills were clumsy and feared being mocked. He added that Phelan's own talent was so immense, he only wished to one day catch up. As he spoke, he held Phelan's suspicious gaze, his own expression turning sorrowful. He subtly touched the bleeding cut on his neck, his voice dropping to a whisper. He lamented that he hadn't realized how much Phelan despised him and promised not to disturb him again. He then turned to leave a calculated retreat. Phelan remained motionless, the hand holding his sword perfectly steady. As Julian began to walk away, Phelan called out his name. A spark of triumph ignited in Julian's chest, but it was quickly extinguished when Phelan tossed something at him. He caught it, a simple leather cord. The voice in his mind dryly identified it as a prop, which the original Julian had removed from his hair to enhance the seductive atmosphere. Relieved it had not been used for its intended purpose, Julian quickly tied back his hair. He waited, expecting Phelan to say something more, perhaps a word of concern, but Phelan merely gave him a cold, dismissive look and remarked icily that Julian shouldn't be disappointed that his little scheme had failed. Dejected, Julian walked away, kicking at loose stones on the path. This world was a grim one. The protagonist was Phelan, a classic tragic hero. His supposed mentor, Master Valerius, was the story's primary villain, a respected figure who secretly practiced forbidden rites to achieve immortality. Valerius's favored apprentice, Damien, was no better, and Julian was a minor character with a horrific ending. His purpose was to be a catalyst for Phelan's descent into darkness, only to discover that all the affection from his master and peers was a lie. They were raising him to be a living vessel, a conduit for power. His fate was to be locked in a dark room, enduring endless agony, an object without dignity. He had to change that fate. Attaching himself to the story's hero seemed the only logical path. He would do it, he decided, because he felt an immediate kinship with his senior brother. Back in his own quarters, Julian pondered his plan. The voice in his mind was frustratingly vague about future events, only confirming that in about a year, Phelan would be branded a traitor and cast out of the academy. He also knew that on his own 18th birthday, his character was fated to be imprisoned. With these grim thoughts swirling, he fell into a deep sleep. In the haze of a dream, something slick and cool traced a path down his neck. A slight sting at his wound was followed by a strange, pleasant tingle. He stirred, on the verge of waking, when the voice in his head commanded him to stay still and keep his eyes closed. Though his consciousness was fuzzy, the image in his mind was sharp. A white-robed figure was leaning over him, a phantom in the moonlight. Dark hair cascaded over the edge of the bed. The pale light caught half of Phelan's face, revealing eyes like cold stars and lips the color of dark wine. His slender, pale fingers were resting on Julian's wound. Julian felt a chill of fear. He wondered if Phelan had decided the cut wasn't deep enough and had come to finish the job. The voice offered no comfort, stating flatly that there were no protective measures for him. He watched, terrified, as Phelan's fingers traced the line of his throat, as if searching for the perfect place to strike. After a long moment, Phelan's voice was a whisper in the dark, questioning why Julian had not reported the injury to their seniors. Julian recalled bumping into another apprentice after leaving Phelan's chambers earlier. Normally, his character would have seized the opportunity to get Phelan punished. But this time he had lied, claiming he'd been careless while practicing his forms. The senior sister who had asked had given him a pitying look, solidifying his reputation as a beautiful fool. Phelan seemed to be speaking to himself, musing aloud whether he should simply kill Julian after all the past torments. Julian's heart hammered in his chest. He couldn't wake up, lest Phelan make good on the threat, but he feared his facade of sleep was failing. Trapped, he turned his head and covered his face with an arm, murmuring as if in a dream, wondering when he would ever be as strong as his senior brother. The voice in his head derided his poor acting. Just as despair set in, Phelan's hand moved. He was applying a cool, soothing balm to the cut, his touch surprisingly gentle. Julian felt a rush of emotion. He told the voice that his brother was a good person, a kind soul who cared for him. He was sure that, with persistence, he could win him over. His thoughts were cut short as Phelan's fingers shifted, coming to rest on his lips. They pressed gently, tracing their shape, even brushing against his teeth. "You're far more pleasing when you're silent," Phelan murmured, his voice barely audible before he straightened up and vanished into the night. A chilling certainty settled over Julian. He knew. Phelan knew he had been awake the whole time. Julian's plan to win over Phelan commenced. He transformed from a sharp-tongued rival into Phelan's most devoted admirer. He gifted Phelan enchanted artifacts that his original self had hoarded. He engineered countless accidental encounters. When Phelan seemed thirsty, Julian was there with fresh water. When Phelan trained, Julian would sit under the branches of a massive old oak tree nearby, pretending to read. Phelan was a true prodigy, training from dawn until dusk without rest. One afternoon, Julian waved from his perch in the tree. He called out enthusiastically, asking if Phelan wanted some honeyed almond cakes, a treat from one of the senior sisters. Phelan stopped, his blade still. A lock of dark hair swept across a small, crimson mole on his cheekbone. He glanced at Julian and said flatly that he did not. His expression was as severe as ever, as if the strange, almost tender phantom from the other night had been a dream. Julian shrugged and popped another cake into his mouth. Phelan watched him, then remarked coolly that indulging one's appetites was detrimental to a warrior's discipline. Julian sighed dramatically, dangling his legs. He countered that the daily training was exhausting, and he needed the sustenance to keep going. Suddenly, he froze. A glint of light shot past him, and a dagger embedded itself in the tree branch beside his head. The air crackled with undisguised killing intent. A half-eaten cake fell from his hand. Tears welled in his eyes. They streamed down his face as he lamented to the voice in his head how cruel Phelan was. After weeks of effort, he still wanted him dead. The voice replied calmly that Phelan had not been aiming for him. There was a venomous snake beside his hand, its fangs having been inches from his wrist. Julian's sobs hitched. He slowly turned his head and saw a brightly colored viper writhing on the branch, pinned by Phelan's dagger. He gasped. Phelan asked why he had stopped crying, noting that his current expression of terror was far more genuine than his earlier sorrow. He then asked if Julian was, perhaps, afraid of snakes. Julian let out a shriek and leaped from the tree. He meant to charge at Phelan in a fit of pique, but he tripped over a root. As he fell, Phelan used the flat of his sword to catch him around the waist, steadying him. Julian grabbed Phelan's shoulders to balance himself, his gaze falling on the dark, metallic collar around Phelan's neck, an artifact said to suppress his half-fey blood. The voice in his head gently called him a fool. Phelan's cold fingertips brushed against his cheek, wiping away a tear. He stated that this was not how one employed a beauty trap. Julian impulsively rubbed his cheek against Phelan's hand, asking his brother to teach him the proper way. Phelan pulled his hand back and took a step away. He then bent down and picked up the book Julian had dropped. A tome of forbidden shadow lore, he read aloud, his eyes questioning. The voice explained that for a body like Julian's, designed to be a vessel, traditional combat training was largely ineffective. Master Valerius had never taught him proper techniques, only those that would make him a more suitable conduit. Julian, however, was determined to have some way to defend himself. He was about to offer an explanation when another apprentice approached. It was Damien, holding a folding fan, a picture of lazy elegance. He announced that Julian could no longer postpone his monthly medicinal bath. The master was waiting. Damien was a monster in disguise. He had supposedly loved the original Julian, yet he was instrumental in his downfall. It was Damien who, after Valerius imprisoned Julian, would offer false hope, only to betray him again and again, ensuring he was subjected to even greater tortures. This medicinal bath was designed to enhance the body's receptiveness to becoming a vessel. Julian had avoided it for as long as he could, but further delay would arouse Valerius's suspicion. He put on a cheerful expression and told Phelan he had to go. Phelan said nothing. Julian walked over to Damien, forcing a smile. He detested Damien. Compared to this two-faced manipulator, Phelan's cold honesty was a relief. Damien wrapped an arm around his shoulders, his tone soft and wounded, as he asked why Julian had been avoiding him lately in favor of Phelan, whom he used to despise. Julian, resisting the urge to roll his eyes, claimed he didn't want to interrupt Damien's important training. Damien then asked if that meant it was acceptable to interrupt Phelan's training. Julian replied that he did it precisely because he disliked Phelan, hoping to slow his progress so he could never surpass Damien. The answer clearly pleased Damien, though he chided Julian for his supposed mischief. At the entrance to Valerius's private sanctum, Julian bid Damien farewell, urging him to train hard and one day surpass their master. Inwardly, he hoped they would destroy each other. Valerius was an elder of the academy, his power immense. With his dark hair and flowing robes, he looked nothing like a man centuries old. Still, being watched by him while soaking in an herbal bath was deeply unsettling. Valerius combed Julian's hair with a wooden comb, his actions disturbingly paternal. He asked if his dearest Jade, his pet name for Julian, had been diligent in his studies. Julian knew the studies were just methods to make himself a more palatable sacrifice. He assured his master with utmost sincerity that he had been studying day and night. A cold hand rested on the butterfly bones of his back. He turned to meet Valerius's gaze. He subtly focused his will, a minor bewitching art he had been practicing. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of confusion crossed the old man's eyes before he regained his composure. He commented on how thin Julian had become and promised to send him rare fruits and potent tonics. The forbidden arts were working. In only a few months, Julian could already momentarily ensnare the mind of a master like Valerius. The hand lingered on his back as Valerius asked his age. Julian smiled sweetly and replied that he was 17. The voice in his mind coldly offered to incapacitate Valerius for an hour. Julian refused. It would be a temporary solution with complicated consequences. Just then, Phelan's voice came from outside the chamber, requesting an audience. Valerius's expression soured instantly. He rose and went outside. Julian wondered what Phelan could possibly want with their master, but he was immensely grateful for the interruption. He waited until he was sure Valerius was occupied before dressing and exiting the chamber. Valerius was seated, looking displeased, while Phelan stood before him, straight and silent. Julian listened and pieced together the situation. A great wyvern was terrorizing the serpent's maw peaks. Several missions had been sent, but all had ended in disaster. Phelan wanted permission to hunt the beast himself. He was powerful, but the wyvern was an ancient and fearsome creature. It was a suicide mission. The voice confirmed that, in the original story, Phelan's trip to the mountains left him severely wounded. Although he succeeded, he spent half a year recovering. Anxious, Julian stepped forward and declared that he would go with his brother. Phelan shot him a surprised look. Valerius, predictably, forbade it, scoffing that Julian would be nothing but a light snack for the monster. Julian grabbed Phelan's sleeve, pleading with him to persuade their master. Phelan's voice was quiet as he stated he couldn't protect Julian. His skills were not yet on par with Damien's. Julian would only get hurt if he followed him. The words sounded oddly familiar, a twisted echo of what Julian himself had told Damien earlier. He wondered if Phelan had overheard. Defeated, he sulked, vowing to find his own way to follow. The serpent's maw peaks were shrouded in a perpetual, disorienting mist. Julian trailed behind Phelan, complaining softly that he was walking too fast. Phelan paused and slowed his pace, but his tone was sharp as he asked why Julian had followed him. Julian replied, without a hint of shame, that he was worried. The wyvern was so dangerous. He couldn't bear the thought of Phelan facing it alone. Phelan gave a short, humorless laugh, his expression unreadable. He suddenly stopped and cast a spell. A shimmering barrier of water enveloped Julian, trapping him. Then, with his blade drawn, Phelan became a storm of steel and ice, launching himself into the mist. A piercing shriek echoed through the mountains, and a massive, black-scaled creature revealed itself, its blood-red eyes burning with hatred. A long gash had been torn across its underbelly, frost already crystallizing around the wound. Julian could only watch, impressed by his brother's ferocious grace. But as the battle raged, the wyvern, in its death throes, seemed to grow in power. At the same time, Phelan's movements became sluggish. A coily crimson began to bleed into his dark eyes, and veins stood out on his neck and wrists. The voice explained that the wyvern's magic was disrupting the seals that suppressed Phelan's fey blood. They were of a similar lineage. The creature's scaled tail whipped towards Phelan as it hissed that a fey blood who sided with humans deserved to die. Phelan murmured that all monsters should die, and thrust his sword forward with renewed fury. He had been raised by Valerius, and his loyalty to the Academy and hatred for his own kind ran deep. Seeing the tide turn, Julian frantically tried to break the water barrier, but it was surprisingly resilient. As he struggled, the barrier began to dissolve on its own. Just as the wyvern's tail was about to strike Phelan's heart, Julian lashed out with a whip, wrapping it around the beast's tail. The wyvern twisted, its fangs sinking deep into Julian's shoulder. He cried out in pain. He noticed a faint aura around the beast, the same foul energy that surrounded Valerius. Before he could process the thought, he pulled a handful of mismatched charms from his satchel and flung them at the wyvern's head. They exploded in a chaotic firework display of conflicting spells. Amid the confusion, he screamed at Phelan to wake up, that his little brother was about to die. Phelan's pupils were black pits, the corners of his eyes stained scarlet. He stared directly at Julian. Then, in a fluid motion, he drove his sword backward, through his own body, impaling the wyvern behind him. Hot blood splattered across Julian's face. Behind Phelan, the massive creature crashed to the ground. Julian's eyes widened in horror. A long, black, scaled tail had emerged from the base of Phelan's spine, and it was now coiling around Julian's legs, its hard scales cold and constricting against his skin. After the ordeal at the serpent's maw, Phelan's renowned sword, he was hailed as a prodigy, the pride of his generation, a warrior as brilliant and uncompromising as a winter storm. Julian, however, knew the truth was far more complicated. He suffered from nightmares and often woke with a chilling sense that he was not alone. When he opened his eyes, he would find the black, scaled tail wrapped around his waist, holding him fast. Phelan would be standing by the window, a pale ghost in the moonlight. Julian would murmur his name, no longer surprised, and then simply fall back asleep. This became a nightly ritual. The voice explained that Phelan's soul had always been incomplete, and the battle had further weakened the seals on his fey blood, causing him to lose control. Julian thought that was no excuse for binding him in his sleep every night. He asked the voice why it had never mentioned the incomplete soul before. The voice replied that it was not important. Julian pressed further, asking why Valerius would allow a half-fae to remain at the academy, given the widespread prejudice. The discovery of Phelan's identity would bring immense trouble. The voice remained silent. One night, the cold scales felt especially tight. Julian frowned and patted the tail gently. "Brother," he mumbled, "it's uncomfortable. Move a little." Phelan came to sit on the edge of the bed. He took Julian's hand, a faint, smoky laugh escaping his lips as he called him spoiled. Yet, the tail slowly grew warmer, its grip softening. Julian knew it then. His brother was all harsh words and hidden kindness. But as the date of the grand tournament approached, his anxiety grew. He still did not know the real reason Phelan would be forced to flee the academy. The tournament winner would be granted entry into the Blade Mausoleum to claim a legendary sword. As expected, Phelan was victorious, defeating even Damien in the final duel. As Damien's sword clattered to the ground, a strange expression crossed his face before he gracefully conceded that his junior brother's talent was truly unmatched. Julian watched Valerius on the high seat, his expression thoughtful, and a sense of deep foreboding washed over him. As Phelan prepared to enter the Blade Mausoleum, a place where countless legendary swords lay dormant, Julian's unease intensified. At the last moment, he cast a shrinking spell on himself and hid within the folds of Phelan's sleeve. The mausoleum was a desolate, bleak landscape, filled with nothing but rusted swords thrust into the barren earth. Phelan pulled him out from his sleeve, poking his cheek with a playful finger, asking if he, too, was seeking a weapon. Julian, stunned at being discovered so easily, asked how he knew. Phelan chuckled, explaining that he'd known all along and had shielded him from the notice of the masters. He then, like a child playing with a doll, began to unbraid and rebraid Julian's hair into two clumsy plaits. Annoyed, Julian retreated back into the sleeve, muttering that he wanted to see what legendary blade his brother would claim. The most famous sword in the mausoleum was Malice, the weapon of Ethelgard's founder, who had single-handedly ended an age of chaos. No one had been able to lift it since his ascension. Julian dozed off in the warmth of the sleeve and awoke to the smell of blood. Phelan was on one knee, his hand gripping the hilt of a long, obsidian sword. His body trembled with effort, and blood dripped from his hair onto the ground. Standing before him was Valerius, his own sword drawn, his usually calm face twisted with greed. "Master, why?" Phelan's voice was a ragged whisper. Before he could finish, he coughed up a mouthful of blood. The voice in Julian's head stated the grim facts with chilling clarity. Steal Malice, extract the blade heart, and shatter his core. Phelan was never a traitor. He was framed by his own master. Valerius's ambition knew no bounds. If he would raise Julian as a vessel, he would certainly not spare a talent like Phelan. His tolerance of Phelan's fey blood was not kindness. It was a long-term investment. Valerius, stuck at the peak of his power for a century, coveted Phelan's innate blade heart and his ability to wield the ancient sword. Phelan was innocent. He was a pawn. The voice told him this was Phelan's destiny, that he could look away. He had his own skills now, enough to survive past his 18th birthday. Phelan was the chosen one of this world. Suffering was a necessary part of his story. Julian was just an observer. But as he watched the scene unfold, The sight of Phelan's blood spreading across the cold ground was too much. He was not a cold-blooded observer. With the sound of a blade tearing through flesh, he found he had moved. He had driven his own dagger deep into Valerius's chest. The voice sounded colder than ever, asking if he truly thought that could kill him. Valerius looked down at the blade with surprise, then began to laugh. He seemed amused that Julian would go to such lengths for his brother. Julian ignored him and took Phelan's hand. "Brother," he said earnestly, "let's run away together." The Academy declared to the world that Phelan had conspired with dark forces, and Julian, bewitched by him, had become his accomplice. They were fugitives hunted across the land. Julian took it in stride, patting the black tail that now seemed a permanent fixture on Phelan. He joked, asking if this made them star-crossed lovers. Phelan caught his hand, rubbing his cold, sculpted cheek against Julian's palm. He vowed that he would not let Julian die. His golden, slitted pupils held a hint of confusion, his fey nature becoming more and more difficult to control. Their life on the run was perilous. They were hunted by warriors from noble houses and by fey creatures drawn to Phelan's blood. Through it all, Phelan always shielded Julian from harm. One day, Julian told him, half joking and half sincere, that Phelan must be in love with him. Otherwise, he asked, why would he repeatedly risk his life for him? He was beginning to feel like a useless vine clinging to a great tree. Phelan, who was polishing his new sword, Malice, looked up. He stated that Julian was not a vine. If not for him, Phelan would have died in the mausoleum. He looked at Julian, his gaze direct and serious, and said that he did love his younger brother. Then he asked, what about him? Why did Julian turn his blade on the master who had cherished him and forsake the home he had always known? Julian wanted to say it was because he knew Valerius's affection was a lie, a mask for his vile greed. He was nothing but a future sacrifice. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he just smiled and said it was for no reason at all. They wandered for months, through snowy landscapes and barren demon lands. They once found themselves in a phantom realm, where an ascended mage had left behind a mirror called the Oracle Pool, said to show one's past and future. Julian expected to see his life in the modern world. Instead, the rippling water showed a youth in violet robes standing under an oak tree, smiling at him. The image dissolved and reformed into a dark, windowless cell. A white-haired figure was shackled in the center, head bowed in shadow. The final vision was of a storm-racked sky. A man in black robes carried a limp, unrecognizable body up a long flight of steps, his sword dripping blood. The mirror slipped from Julian's hand and shattered. They were nearing the borders of the Maelstrom, a land of pure chaotic energy, when Damien and his knights caught up to them. He seized Julian's hands, his voice full of false pity. He said that his dear brother had had his fun, seeing the world, and now it was time to come home. He revealed that Valerius had placed a tracking charm on Julian long ago. They were never truly free. Julian turned to warn Phelan, but it was too late. Valerius was already there, his sword piercing Phelan's back. Julian fought with all his strength, breaking free from Damien's grasp and throwing himself in front of Phelan. Valerius smiled, his tone patronizing. He asked if Julian intended to stab him again, like a foolish ant trying to topple a tree. Phelan grabbed his sleeve, blood trickling from his lips. His power was surging, spiraling out of control. Julian knew what he was planning. He meant to detonate his own life force, taking them all with him. Phelan confirmed it with a look, saying Julian did not want to go back. Julian laughed, a harsh, broken sound. He asked if becoming a living bomb was his only solution. Phelan's eyes were wild but resolute as he promised Julian would not be harmed. Julian drew his own sword. His face was a mask of cold fury. In one swift movement, he plunged the blade into Phelan's back, at the very spot where Valerius's sword had been. He twisted and pulled, and a splash of blood hit his face. He didn't even blink. Before anyone could react, he held a glowing, crystalline object in his hand. The blade heart. Phelan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Julian," he whispered. Julian kicked him, sending him tumbling over the edge and into the fathomless abyss of the maelstrom below. It was a place from which no one had ever returned. Years passed. Valerius tried several times to complete the ritual to make Julian his vessel, but Julian always found a way to thwart him, often by manipulating Damien. Consumed by a twisted obsession, Damien no longer wanted Julian to be a sacrifice. He asked Valerius for Julian's hand in marriage. Valerius, after a moment's thought, agreed. Julian knew the truth. Valerius suspected Phelan had survived the maelstrom, and this wedding was the bait to draw him out. Julian played along. The day Phelan returned would be the day Valerius died. But after what he had done, it would likely be his own day of judgment as well. The night before the wedding, Julian sat before a flickering candle. Damien was on the other side of the door, speaking of his excitement for the morning. His voice filled with sleepless joy. Julian responded with cold, clipped answers, a sneer on his lips. Suddenly, an arm like an iron band clamped around his waist. A cold blade pressed against his throat. A hard chest was flush against his back, and long dark hair spilled over his shoulder, carrying the scent of frost and winter. "Little brother," a familiar voice whispered in his ear. "It's been a while. It seems you were starting to forget me." The voice was a low growl, laced with a chilling amusement. "To return now on the eve of your wedding. Am I the guest of honor?" The words "how dare you" were drawn out, each syllable dripping with a cold, murderous fury that made Julian tremble. "Are you afraid of me?" Phelan murmured. "You didn't even blink when you carved out my heart, but now you tremble." Julian turned his head to look up at the dark-robed man towering over him, his eyes glowing a faint, menacing crimson. "Why would I be afraid of you, brother?" Julian laughed softly, his voice a sultry whisper. "I love you." He reached up, his fingertips brushing against Phelan's lips, and pulled his head down for a kiss. Phelan responded with brutal force, his kiss a punishing bite that drew blood. Julian struggled, but Phelan's grip was unbreakable. Outside, Damien was still talking, oblivious. The kiss ended, leaving Julian breathless and bruised. "So rebellious," Phelan purred. "Marrying another man tomorrow, yet sharing such intimacies with me tonight." Julian's anger flared. He had never realized Phelan possessed such a talent for cruel irony. The wedding day was a grand affair. Julian, dressed in ceremonial red robes, walked with Damien toward the high platform where Valerius sat, watching everything with a thoughtful expression. In the years since Phelan's fall, Julian had pieced together the full truth. The wyvern at the serpent's maw had been a puppet of Valerius, used to harvest the life force of other warriors. Valerius had long been in league with dark powers, planning to sacrifice half the land to fuel his own twisted ascension. Phelan was the hero chosen by fate to stop him. Their conflict was inevitable. As they reached the platform, a sudden gasp went through the crowd. The sky had darkened, and snowflakes began to fall. Valerius stared intently at a point in the distance. Julian felt a presence and began to turn, but the world spun. Phelan had him, an arm locked around his waist, lifting him into the air. His red robes billowed like blood-stained wings. An overwhelming wave of power, colder and sharper than any winter, shot from Phelan's sword, malice, and slammed into Valerius. The master staggered back, his face a mask of shock. You're alive. Your power, a disappointment, I'm sure," Phelan's voice boomed. He explained that while Valerius had taken his blade heart and nearly achieved godhood, he himself had been forged anew in the Maelstrom's crucible, emerging as something more. He declared that Valerius, who treated life as a plaything, was a disgrace and would now face judgment. With a wave of his hand, images filled the air, projecting Valerius's darkest secrets for all to see. Enraged, Valerius attacked, but it was the desperate struggle of a cornered beast. His attacks were effortlessly deflected until he was brought to his knees powerless. Watching this, Damien began to laugh, a broken, hysterical sound. "So we won't be married after all, will we, little brother?" he asked Julian. When Julian remained silent, Damien's eyes filled with madness. "Then let's go to hell together." He snatched a sword and lunged at Julian. Julian was prepared to dodge, but a pale, slender hand caught the blade. Blood dripped from the hand, but the sword dissolved into dust. Julian looked up. The man who stood before him was Phelan, but not the dark, vengeful one. This Phelan wore white robes, his presence serene and ethereal. It was the voice from his mind, now given form. "You look beautiful in red, brother," the apparition said with a gentle smile. It raised its bleeding hand and used the blood to trace Julian's lips, like a lover applying color. Julian stood on his toes and kissed him. In the distance, Valerius finally fell, lifeless. The dark Phelan was wiping his sword, a faint smile on his face as he watched them. "You're distracted," the white-robed Phelan murmured, a hint of jealousy in his tone. Then, his form dissolved like smoke and merged into the dark Phelan, like a drop of water returning to the ocean. Phelan's eyes flickered, a new depth of understanding within them. He was whole now. He raised his sword, malice, and gently lifted Julian's chin with its tip. His voice was dangerously soft. "And now, my dear little brother, it is time to settle the account for a stolen heart and a fall into darkness." The oracle pool had shown the truth. This was not their first life. The first time there was no voice, no guide. Julian had come to this world innocent and naive, and had died a horrific death as a vessel. Phelan, after being betrayed and broken, had emerged from the abyss to find only his lover's corpse. In his grief and rage, he had slain their enemies, and then, at the pinnacle of power, he had struck a blow against fate itself, demanding a second chance. He had shattered his own soul, sending one fragment across worlds to find and guide the one he loved, ensuring that this time, their story would not end in tragedy. What he thought was a first meeting was, in fact, a reunion years in the making, the mending of a story broken by fate, now finally made whole.